I'm here on a wonderful episode of the Fluid Voice. She, they pronouns. I forgot. I was gonna say something else. Oh, I am feeling better. From from last week. I apparently had the mildest version of COVID. Although we already argued way too much about masks. If you want to watch us argue about watch an earlier episode, because we're talking about something else. Anyways, I'm here with Christy. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, and believe it or not, I've been sick for the last couple of weeks. Guess what I had?
The flu?
No, I got reinfected somehow.
Oh, okay then.
So I got it back in March, and now I got it again. Yay!
Okay.
Welcome to the new world.
Perfect. How are you doing?
Oh, she heard, by the way.
I haven't had COVID. I guess I count as doing well.
That's good. Although technically you have the capability of being asymptomatic. So no, I'm not going to go there. Sophia, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm Sophia, she, her, and I'm the one trans co-host on this show who hasn't had COVID.
Wait, I don't know. Aria, you are our special guest and running for police.
Well, I'm running for sheriff.
Sheriff. Yeah, sheriff. Yes. There we go. Not
the police chief is appointed, not elected.
So,
yeah, admittedly, I am not super well known. I'm not super well known about the police. Wow, I once again can't speak.
Well, they have a complicated system in place, but it's sort of convenient for my purposes because the sheriff is an elected office. People are always surprised. Well, you don't need any law enforcement experience to run for sheriff. No, you don't need any experience at anything to run for president. That's the entire point of all of this.
Well, you need one thing to run for no, you need two things. One is to be born in America, and the other is to be at least 35.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Pretty much it. And apparently...
and you can be born in a different country if your parents are... There's like a bunch of other complicated rules for reasons that it's fine.
Yeah, John McCain was born in the when the US had the 10-mile exclusion thing along the Panama Canal. But of course, Ted Cruz was born in Canada, and I don't know how that works because he was running.
Well, you have to have been born a U.S. citizen is the rule.
Right, okay.
Yeah, they don't. It's not dry foot, wet foot anymore.
But it's never been tested. There's a lot of room around the edges where it's just never been tested, and our legal system works on trial cases, so you have to test it.
We are talking about the police, or more specifically, admittedly, I did title the episode "The Police." The fuck, but that said,
I like the title.
Monetization be damned.
It's all right. We understand, Alex. You've had COVID.
Aria, what are your opinions on the police force in general, since you are a special guest?
The police in the United States are not what everyone assumes them to be. We're taught as children the police officers are these fine, upstanding, honorable people who are out there, doing good things and helping people. But that's not what they're actually doing. That's just part of the mythology of the state that, allows it to perpetuate itself, is that it has all of this mythology, all of these false beliefs attached to it, because we don't want to call it kidnapping. We don't want to call it extortion. We instead call it arrest and ticketing. But that's ultimately what it is. It's kidnapping and extortion. And meanwhile, people believe that police aren't bad people, that they're generally good people, that they're out there, doing good things, making society better by kidnapping and extorting people. I oppose that entire apparatus because that's what leads to people like Eric Garner being killed on the streets of New York for a victimless crime, for selling loose cigarettes. The police showed up, they wanted to arrest the guy so they could extort some money from him, and they killed him. All of these interactions where police ultimately kill somebody, it's because either a victimless crime was being pursued or someone recklessly involved the police. I mean, suicide by a cop is a real thing, and it shouldn't even be a thing, but that's the reputation the police have.
Yeah.
And they can't be trusted. We're told that this 19-year-old girl in the back of a cop car whose hands were cuffed behind her back managed to get a gun and shoot herself in the back of the head. The police, that's the official story about that event. And there were witnesses there who said, no, the police shot her. But there's no video of it. It's just absurd. You have Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. Police are out of control. And the only, there's a lot of movement going now for disarming the police. And that would be great, or not disarming. I'm the one saying disarm. Defunding the police. And that would be great. But we can't actually trust city councils to do it. And Seattle and other cities have shown us that repeatedly when they talk about defunding the police. It's popular for a bit. Then it goes to this committee and it just sort of gets buried and it never happens. Or you get the opposite result where they increase funding for the police. They call it, oh, we're going to increase funding so that we can bring in therapists and more mental health experts and all of that. But ultimately what they do with that money is they buy more guns and more SWAT teams and more Bearcats.
Yeah, and I know a lot of this stuff is well, it's state-sanctioned activity that would be criminal in any other circumstance.
I think, because Aria lives in Keene, and doesn't the Keene Police Department... I mean, Keene's like a really small town, right?
It is. It's a population of, I think, 24,000.
Right. And they have a Bearcat.
Yes, they do.
Why?
I don't know. The meeting about the Bearcat...
the United States military sells them surplus for dirt cheap.
Yeah, but they
didn't even buy it. The federal government bought it for the city of Keene under the condition that if the federal government ever wants to use it, then they can borrow it. But they have it despite the city council meeting where they voted on the Bearcat. It had a record turnout. More people, the rooms were literally packed upstairs and downstairs of people speaking out against the Bearcat. But the city council went ahead with it anyway. These supposed Democrat, liberal, because they're all Democrats, everyone on the Keene City Council, you can't get elected city council otherwise, unless you do something else to get people's attention while running as a Republican. But they're all Democrats, and they're voting to give the police more weapons, more deadly weapons.
I mean, the thing about a lot of areas, it's very sectioned off, and people have their own breakdown of parties, but why do people outside of conditioning, like the social conditioning, do you think there are any other reasons? And obviously anyone can answer this. Oh no, Perfict disappeared again. Hopefully that's just internet problem. But anyways, what do you think? Why do you think people outside of social conditioning care about the police? Or is there a reason outside of social conditioning in your mind? Any of your minds? Yeah.
It depends. Do you mean why are people concerned about the police outside of social conditioning? Because if I'm going to be kidnapped or extorted, odds are it's going to be by a police officer. An ordinary person isn't going to do that to me. They just call it fining and arresting. But if I'm going to be kidnapped, the chances are overwhelmingly likely that it's going to be a police officer who does that to me under the guise of following the law.
I was thinking more along the lines of why do you think people outside of social conditioning, why do you think people seem to think that there is a benefit to police? I guess more so what I was thinking.
If you get burgled or mugged.
Well, people are afraid. I mean, people are afraid of freedom. They're afraid of the prospect of their neighbors having freedom. So they're convinced that if they don't have the police out there to protect them, then their neighbor may break into their home and rape their wife or shoot them in the head or something. But again, that's not actually realistic. It does happen, but it's extremely unlikely. You're far more likely to have the police shoot you in your home than you are a random neighbor. So we're taught to be afraid. And in this fear, we embrace the police state.
I haven't asked you yet, Aria. Have you? One question I haven't asked you is, have you spent any time at the Keen Spiritual Retreat yet?
I have not. I am actually trying to get pulled over actively. Like, I bought a new car recently and I put exterior lights on it that alternate between purple and green. Cops like telling people that this is illegal. I know for a fact it's not. Now, RSA 266 in the state of New Hampshire makes it clear that you can't have amber, red, or blue, but I'm trying actively to get pulled over for something that is legal, and they're just not biting. I do have a friend, a trans friend, who recently did time in the Cheshire County Spiritual Retreat. She was there for about 2 days, and despite having an ID that stated her sex was female, they put her in the men's ward. The ACLU of New Hampshire has not responded to me trying to find an attorney to sue the ever-loving hell out of them.
Yeah.
Actually, something we should bring up is do the Republicans hate you more for being trans or for being a Satanist?
I don't know. I mean, or an anarchist, right? There's a lot of facets about me that, generally speaking, they would disapprove of. But New Hampshire is weird, right? There are a lot of Republicans here who are actually liberty-oriented and who are socially progressive. How many of those Republicans actually exist, and how many are going to vote for me because of my positions on, gun rights and small government? I don't know. But some Republicans, I know Mark Edge is really, really upset about me being a Satanist. He doesn't seem to mind the rest of it. But he's a Republican, and he becomes more and more Republican every single day, apparently. But I mean,
well, the thing about it is, I've said this to you before, but the thing is, a lot of people have this impression about Satanists that you're sacrificing virgins in the woods wearing a goat's head and robes, and that's not modern Satanism.
That's
no,
very...
we're more about like orgies and stuff.
Yeah, which is cool as far as I'm concerned.
Christy, you were going to say something earlier.
I was going to say something at the beginning because we jumped right into the conversation without actually saying who our guest is and why she's here.
Oh, that's true. Sorry, I just my brain went to the assuming that everyone knew you, Aria DiMezzo, but
I do have a question, but let me at least do the introduction. So Aria is running for sheriff in King County, New Hampshire, as a Republican, though being on the slogan of
correction. It's Cheshire County, not King.
Cheshire County. Sorry, King is part of Cheshire County. Yeah. The Cheshire County Sheriff has made international news. I wanted to ask about as a Republican, as a trans Satanist, which is
running under the Republican Party right is different than being a Republican necessarily in terms of how one identifies.
Well, the point Aria has made is that people go automatically into the voting booth and will vote, for whoever's got an R after the name or whoever's got a D after the name without actually checking what their platform happens to be. And I think Aria, that is probably the most important thing she has done. Showed up that the fact that people do not look into what candidates actually stand for. And I applaud her for that.
Well, that wasn't even intentional, That was just a result of, I expected maybe 25 to 50 votes because these are, quote, well-connected and well-educated primary voters. They're supposed to know all about, party politics and who's who. And so I expected, people who knew me, like Ian Freeman, Matt Roach, and some others, would just go in there and they would vote for me, and I'd get maybe between 25 and 50 votes. And instead, more than 4,000 Republicans went in there and voted for me. And then, of course, that made headlines, and they found out, oh God, it's a trans Satanist anarchist. What in the world are we going to do? How did this happen? Who allowed this to happen? And that sat in the back of my mind. This is their fault. They're the ones who literally voted for me. They're the ones who caused this to happen, and they're asking how this happened.
The question I wanted to ask is, what did you? I know this was not something you expected. It was the international curiosity factor, the sudden fame there, or infame.
No, and I was at work when it happened, so I was only very, very tangentially even aware that this was exploding. When Fox News ran their story, that was the start of it, and I didn't even know what had happened because I was at work and I could only check my phone once every 2 hours or so. But it was blowing up. I was receiving emails constantly, so I knew something was happening and that it was probably pretty major. And I received so many emails, so many contact attempts within that first 48-hour period that I just got completely and totally buried and had to bring on a campaign manager. Now, that's stupid for a county level office to require a campaign manager to keep up with the volume of communication.
Yeah.
Joe Arpaio probably has a campaign manager. I mean, he's internationally renowned. He's a horrible monster cat.
He's a cunt.
He is. So he probably has a campaign manager, but I'm probably the only sheriff candidate in the United States other than he who actually needed a campaign manager. And I no longer do. I just got buried, and Ian and I dug my way out of that, and now things are just rolling along more smoothly.
Well, I do remember talking to you when it was all blowing up, and you were very stressed. I do recall that, and it's understandable. But one thing I want to highlight is obviously you've proved the point about people not looking into your platform. But believe it or not, this has happened from within the trans community as well. I mean, I posted up your story on several trans groups, and I remember the responses were, "Oh, why is it always right wing and far right trans women like Blair White and Caitlyn Jenner get attention?" And I was face palming. I was going, fuck's sake, it says trans anarchist Satanist, but because she's running as a Republican, you naturally think she's a Trump supporter.
No, and I would never be a Trump supporter. I expected that from the left. I mean, there is a PAC here, a political action committee here in New Hampshire called Our Moment, and their stated goal is to get LGBTQ people elected, and they endorsed Eli Rivera over me.
And he's a heterosexual, cisnormative male, isn't he?
He is.
Who supports the war on drugs.
Yes. So I'm not only more progressive than he is, and far to the left of him, I'm also actually trans, and yet they went ahead and endorsed him anyway. And the reason, we all know the reason, it's because there's an R next to my name and a D next to his.
Well, the other thing about Eli Rivera, I remember this, is when someone pointed a video camera in his face, he threatened to thump them. Yeah. I remember that very well.
He's not a nice guy.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, yeah.
And he probably only runs as a Democrat because it's expedient to. He's probably a Republican, really.
Well, I mean, there's that too. But in terms of a lot of these things, that is just a genuine problem of the shortcuts people take with one finding out about people, where it's just like, oh, I know this one thing. Okay, now I know. I'm going to assume everything about them and ignore any exceptions. Although, when it comes to larger organizations, it's always more difficult to discern general motivations. There are plenty of organizations that have been LGB and sometimes T, which is the classic description from the 90s.
So you're not getting any help from the LGBTQ community?
It is what it is. I am. I mean, I'm sure a fair number of the people now following me on Twitter and Facebook or whatever are LGBTQ. As far as LGBTQ organizations, no. LGBTQ Nation, they did ultimately contact me for an interview, but Fox News covered the story about a trans person winning a sheriff candidacy before LGBTQ Nation had any interest in it whatsoever. Pink News has never reached out to me. A lot of these gay news outlets are just, they're running stories from the AP or they're syndicating stories, but none of them have actually been like, hey, we should talk to this person.
Well, I actually contacted Pink News, well, via a friend for you. And yeah, they were slow. They definitely were slow. They did actually run another story on you the other day, funny enough.
They did. But why haven't they contacted me?
That was only after the AP had run a story on you.
Yeah.
Well, when you were on my show at that point, you were running unopposed, and I didn't even know you had a write-in candidate going against you. So.
Well, I don't think I did then. The write-in thing happened like 5 days before the primary, because one guy in Ringe actually looked into me, and I hid nothing. All anyone had to do was Google my name, and they would have found out everything about me. But they just didn't bother. So this one guy did, and he started spreading the word. And they're like, okay, well, we're just going to write in Earl Nelson then. It didn't work, but I mean, it was a well-done campaign. He got a substantial number of votes. Not nearly as many as I did, but he got some.
The other thing I remember is I've seen some of the comments. Sorry. No, go ahead, Christy.
The funny thing about it, the way I found out is somebody from 4chan of all people reached out to me because you had been on my channel and told me about the write-in win, and I was like, wait, what is that? And apparently 4chan Paul is behind you, which I don't think is a good endorsement.
No, that's very weird. Actually, in speaking of bad endorsements, I've actually learned today that Christopher Cantwell, the crying Nazi, endorsed me from his prison cell.
Oh, what the fuck?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm white, and Rivera is of Puerto Rican ancestry or something. So I imagine that's why. It can't be because of anything I stand for. I mean, he and I oppose each other pretty consistently.
Yeah.
I know that Keene and its county have a strong audit presence. People who audit the police and the rights audit. They photograph public buildings from the sidewalk and demonstrate that they have the right to do that. So how do you view when you eventually win, which I think it's obvious that you're going to?
I hope so.
I mean,
how do you envision your relationship with them?
Oh, I'm part of them.
There you go.
I'm one of the people out there partaking in Cop Block, which is, this attempt to impede the cops in their stupid little investigations. One of the dumbest things I've ever seen was at a Friday night nightcap where me, Ian, and like 3 or 4 others were drinking in Central Square. And the cops pulled over someone for not turning on their headlights, which is really easy to do. Keene is very well lit, especially right there on Main Street, which is where we were at. And they ended up arresting both the driver and the passenger and having their car impounded. So the Keene PD managed to extort probably $1,000 from this guy, all because he forgot to turn on his headlights. And the passenger was so drunk that he vomited 3 times on the side of the street. And all I wanted to do was get this guy a bottle of water and a cheesy bread. That was my solution. Can we get this guy some food and some water so he doesn't die here on the street? That's what Sheriff DiMezzo would have done. Oh God, this guy, he's vomiting way too much. He needs water and food so that he doesn't die.
Yeah.
And the police were having none of that. So if he wants water, he can ask for water. Yeah, I seem to recall George Floyd asking for air as well and not getting any.
The one thing I will say about Alex Jones, despite all the anti-Semitic shit you get from him, is that before he sort of sold out and started sucking Donald Trump's cock, he did document quite well, I hate to say that for Alex Jones, the militarization of the police in the United States.
Yeah, he's made some good content. I don't support him, and I don't agree with almost anything he says now.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's right. I've heard some really atrocious stories about the fact that the police will send in SWAT to break to investigate stuff which is completely inappropriate to be sending SWAT in. Look, if there's a guy, waving around a shotgun, in some bank keeping hostages, yeah, send in SWAT. I get it. But if someone is running a supposed illegal poker game in some bar, you don't send in SWAT. But I've heard a case where SWAT was sent in, and it's like, what the fuck? This is the militarization. This is the rise of fascism.
Absolutely.
The more instances that you can use a SWAT team in during the course of a year, the better justification you have for that expenditure.
Exactly.
That's also why the drug war continues. I mean, it's the only thing keeping them employed.
Yeah.
Right. But one of the things that fascinates me is the idea of separating policing and the apprehension and pursuit of criminals, that those are not the same activity. And that they don't need to be treated the same. They can be separated into separate departments like fire department and police department.
Well, you already have the separation of detectives and patrolmen.
Yes, but rather than having them be the same, you separate it into two separate departments. One is responsible for policing, which is a very different activity, and the other is responsible for the apprehension of criminals.
I'd rather get rid of the policing entirely. Instead of giving them their own department, just abolish the department, just fire them. That would be my preferred solution.
Admittedly, when it comes to the patrol policing, I would agree. But Christy, you were about to say something at the same time.
Oh yeah. In one of the stories during the protest, and one of the things that got people going was the pushing over of a 50-some-year-old man. I think he's 60-some actually. In downtown Buffalo, where I am. Yeah, and cracked his head open, and that that the entire department quit in solidarity with the person who did it, which is actually not what happened. The what happened is the Buffalo Police and Sheriff's Department have eliminated that department entirely.
Yeah, but
most of the people on it quit not out of solidarity, but out of we don't want to fucking do this anymore. I mean, we shouldn't be smacking up protesters. So so a lot of it's been misreported how what actually has happened. There is a not a defunding, but a breaking up of the way policing is done here.
Well,
I think is actually.
I was going to say we both watched that video, didn't we, of that actual incident? And I remember the SWAT team.
I know the man.
All right, the SWAT team. I remember the video, and the SWAT team just walked by. They didn't give a shit about him. I remember they just walked. They knocked him to the ground and they just walked on by.
Well, the captain, who's the person who the guy who pushed him over, is the one who kind of shoved the guy who pushed him over out of the. There's more video than is normally shown, and I'm not giving anybody a pass on this. But I'm definitely not giving anybody a pass on this. This was fucking horrid. This guy is somebody that everybody knows. It's like your local Fred on the corner. You always know he's there, and everybody knows who he is. I know him, and I barely have any acting with the food bank because he's a food bank worker.
Sorry.
No. So it's it was a lot of the misreporting. There's it's a very strange thing going on here.
Well, there's that new Mother Army song about people judging through the media called "You Weren't There." It's worth listening to because what you've just described absolutely encapsulates that song. I was gonna say I've got a question for Aria about Black Lives Matter. I remember you saying that you support the movement, but you said that the organization was Marxist. How is it Marxist?
I don't know. I've never actually looked into it.
but you've described it as Marxist. So how do
I
you
get
know
that
it's
information from other people I trust, like Mark Edge, who describe it as a Marxist organization. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can support Black Lives Matter regardless of where I stand on the organization.
Yeah, I'm whatever. I'm sus about any description of random organizations as Marxist, but that's another story. So in terms of actually dealing with things, because I realize you're running for sheriff. I keep almost going to the other police title because the police is so weird. So what exactly would you in the short term, you can only do so much at a time. It's not so simple to get everything done at once.
Well, the immediate policy, it would be a drastic change for what the sheriffs and for what the deputies and the staff are expected to deal with and what they normally deal with. I'm giving them the option of going out and policing the police, or just sitting in the office and responding only to crimes where there are actual victims. I doubt very many of them will actually go out and police the police. But if they want to stay employed, those are their options. They can't go out there and enforce laws against victimless crimes. They can't aggress against people. I think that would have an immediate and very positive impact. And I hope it comes to play because it would show all of these counties throughout the United States that you can, in fact, get police under control. You just have to have a sheriff who is willing to do it, because the police system here in the United States, you're right, it is very weird. You have the police departments and then you have the sheriff's offices, but all of that's sort of intentional. That it's by design that the sheriff's department exists outside of the normal police system. And the sheriff, because of that, is the highest law enforcement official in the county. So it wouldn't matter whether it was the Keene police chief or just some low-level officer. I can arrest them. My deputies, people who I deputize, can arrest them for aggressing against people. And I think this example could be set here in Cheshire County, and that other parts of the world and the United States will look at it and go, hey, we need to do that too. That's what the sheriff is for, to answer directly to the people. That's why it's an elected office. So if the people have problems with what the police are doing, then vote in sheriffs who are going to do something about it.
I am still in our local election. A guy named John Flynn, who's he's not great, but he's not horrible. Is the guy running for sheriff, and Democrat, Republican, conservative, working families, libertarian, liberal. We have one other party on the thing, but he's on all of those lines. It's like there is no choice here for a sheriff, so we got to go with Flynn some more.
Well, I mean, technically, there is a choice, but to some degree, that requires people to, because technically, can't you do a write-in for everything? Technically,
yes.
I realize that sort of thing is the thing about a lot of it is a lot of it looks big. A lot of everything looks big, and it's little actions that inspire others and help grow movements, and little things do actually matter. Like, Aria, you're in like a small county in New Hampshire. On the surface, that isn't making a big difference, but in some ways it is. Like, you speaking out about stuff, you explaining stuff that people aren't taught or don't learn about on their own. And, that does impact people, and the more it's easy to say more people should do it, and it's easy to say that but yeah, things should be tried.
I would agree. And I think, I hope that I've inspired a lot of people. I hope that in 2022, we see trans candidates running for sheriff all throughout the United States. That would be great.
That would be
right?
awesome.
Or just
and-
running for any political office. I don't care if they have to hijack the Republican Party's infrastructure in order to do that. That's what I did. I'm not a Republican, but they had this infrastructure there that I could hijack, so I did.
Yeah, no, I have.
So you just took a note from Trump, right?
Yeah, yeah, I did exactly what Trump did.
Well, I mean, Trump believes in far more of the Republican values, but yeah, no, I get what you mean. Because I've had similar thoughts before. I just haven't actually done it, and someone actually doing it, it's like, oh, I could do that too. Like it's genuinely a good feeling, especially because fucking nothing's happened yet in Minneapolis. Things have started down a political road in which things may happen, but nothing.
I doubt
really,
it. I mean, the buzz around it will die out. People will stop caring, and it will just get forgotten.
Yeah, so long as nothing more gets done, and this is one of those things where yeah, people. Even just like if you say people need to do it, even if it's true, that's to me that just seems like extra pressure. Like there are a lot of things people want to do that people just feel like they can't do, and
yeah,
people can do a lot more than they think they can.
I was gonna say, I saw some comments on the Free Keen forum about how Aria is unsuitable to run for sheriff because she's a former drug addict. Well, I don't know if that's true. That's up to Aria to tell us if it is.
It's true.
Right. Okay.
The same person, they don't have their facts, so they think I've been to rehab and all this other stuff. That wasn't the case. I was addicted for about a 6-month period to opiates, to painkillers. It wasn't a very long part of my life, but it did become an actual addiction. And then I kicked the habit. So I know what it's like to be addicted to something. You don't need jail to deal with it. You need positive changes to your life.
Well, to borrow a Bill Hicks quote, he was talking about why is it that there's an anti-drug czar, and wouldn't it was some law enforcement agent person, and he said, wouldn't it be better to have an addict as an anti-drug czar because they know about drugs, know about being addicted to drugs. And I would say, if you've had a previous drug addiction, that actually probably makes you a more suitable candidate to be sheriff because you understand, the mentality of drug addicts far more.
That's the position that I took initially. And I mean, I still agree with that position. I think it was like 2.5 years ago when the union leader first talked about me running for sheriff was that, having been a drug addict, a lot of people want to hold that against me. I don't. I am who I am today in large part because of everything I've ever done. And that includes that brief period where I was, in fact, addicted to painkillers. I'm upfront about that. I know what it's like to live in that part of society where you're lying to your spouse, you're leaving your house at 2:00 in the morning to go and buy drugs from someone in the middle of a slum. I know what that's like. Does Rivera know what that's like? How is he going to help these people if he has no idea of the world they're actually living in?
Well, I always remember I was having a debate with a conservative here once, and I said that heroin should be subscribed on the NHS. And he went, I don't want, addicts to have a get free fucking prescriptions for heroin. That costs me my tax money. And I go, it already costs you money in your home insurance premiums because, what do you think heroin addicts are going to do to fund their habit? They're going to steal. Okay. And, that's what people just don't realize. They don't see the actual cost on them for the war on drugs.
Because most of it's hidden, but the war on drugs. I mean, we saw this during the 1920s when the American government, prohibited alcohol. It produced a lot of criminal behavior because people couldn't just go into the store and buy alcohol.
Yeah.
The federal government even started poisoning alcohol, which I think we're probably going to find in a number of years that the U.S. government is responsible for putting the fentanyl in the heroin that's killing people. I suspect that's what we're going to find. But we have horrible things in Russia right now, like crocodile, because the people of Russia can't just go into the store and buy heroin. And the police are killing people and forcing the drug war. All of these consequences would immediately go away if we legalized all drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just
Right.
provide help for people who are addicted. Like, I mean, there's already a social stigma to taking drugs and definitely especially being addicted to drugs. It's not like people are saying, "Oh, I'm going to fuck my life over," as a fun little choice. Usually it's there's a lot of circumstances or whatever, and
Well, when I say drugs, I would also include caffeine and nicotine and aspirin.
yeah.
And I'm absolutely still addicted to caffeine, but it's not destructive to my life because I can just go into a store and buy it. If I had to buy it illegally out on the streets, that's when it becomes destructive.
I was gonna.
Yeah, at least I'm an alcoholic, which makes which is reasonably legal, although the way I went about it was very bad. Coming up on 25 years, so I think the statute of limitations. But I did a lot of PCP too, so way back.
I remember there was also a conservative who said to me, because I advocate for the end of the war on drugs, and he said you can't think that drugs are good. He said all drugs are bad. I said, okay, right. Stop drinking wine, stop drinking coffee, stop taking anything the doctor prescribes you. And he goes, you're being ridiculous. I went, all right. So you seem to think that because the government says this drug is bad and this drug is good, but the government, that's the word of God. It's not. There are reasons why certain drugs are illegal, and it's because it helps the government, maintain control.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, some of marijuana being illegal has a lot to do with industry and hemp paper companies wanting to get rid of hemp.
Well,
and also because the blacks smoke the marijuana.
Well,
Yeah,
also Hispanic people, but I mean, obviously, it's the same with opium. But Chinese instead.
Which media mogul was it that Citizen Kane was based on?
Fuck.
Whoever it was, that's it. Yeah,
Howard Hughes.
No, William Randolph Hearst. He lobbied for hemp to be made illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did indeed.
Because he had a paper company.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another thing that needs to... Well, I mean, there's so much that... Even if you're talking about incremental change, I think there's a lot of change that needs to be made. But,
I wouldn't enforce the drug war in Cheshire County as sheriff, and I would arrest police officers who attempted to do so. I do think heroin should be legal, as should crystal meth and shrooms and all sorts of drugs. It's not my call to make about whether or not it's a good idea for someone to use heroin. I wouldn't do it. I would prefer to educate people like, hey, instead of doing heroin, why don't you try these shrooms? They won't destroy your life. And maybe we can convince them to do that. But arresting them and throwing them in prison, that's not helping anything.
I also support your reasoning for a good alternative solution, depending on the circumstance, because heroin's a little bit riskier. But I mean, if you're told all drugs are bad, and then like pot's nothing, and shrooms are basically helpful, it's hard to trust anything that you read about drugs. So that in itself makes it harder.
Kids
to
are
get
dying.
information.
Kids are dying because of this nonsense, right? There was this Benadryl challenge on TikTok a few months ago where these kids were overdosing on Benadryl because if you take enough of it, you have a trip. But if you take just slightly over that, you die. And they've all been taught, oh, drugs are bad. We can't do drugs except for these government approved drugs. It's okay for us to take Benadryl because Benadryl is legal. The government says it's fine. those kids would still be alive if they would have just smoked some pot.
It's
Or
the-
if they could have just gotten some LSD or some shrooms or MDMA or something, they would still be alive. They're dead because of the drug war. It's killing kids.
Yeah.
yeah, this is a 365 bottle of Benadryl. It's right on my shelf here. So
And that's heroin. I mean, I've got tramadol, which is essentially heroin, right? I'm prescribed it. Right?
I don't have much. I do drink Monster Energy drinks, but to be fair, I've got a potential sleep problem. That's the thing when it's hard to a lot of getting through doctor's appointments and getting prescriptions with stuff is sometimes you need a Band-Aid.
And I always say, people say, yeah, marijuana is a gateway drug, and I go, well, if you're going to take that argument, we should ban chocolate, because I'm sure every heroin addict has eaten a chocolate bar in their time.
Well, it's not just that. It's the logic of mother's milk causes cancer.
And also,
Because I mean, if you get cancer, you had mother's milk, so mother's milk causes cancer.
Also, you don't see there being turf wars over the distribution of cough syrup, do you? And the reason I use cough syrup is it is addictive. Benylin is addictive. There was a guy who used to sell me ganja, and he basically used to send me and my mate Owen down to the local pharmacist to get him bottles of Benylin. He used to drink 2 bottles of this a day. Cough syrup, the stuff that makes you drowsy.
Yeah, but the marijuana becoming a gateway drug is because you've made it a gateway behavior. You became illegal. You're doing an illegal thing. You're in contact with people who traffic in illegal substances. Therefore, you have access to other illegal substances through them or their associates and so on. And you're already outside the law. It seems like a small step. Yeah, that's a gateway behavior, not a gateway drug.
yes,
Well, yeah. I
Yeah,
think
'cause
we
you're-
all.
yeah.
I think we all agree that the war on drugs sucks. I think that's one thing we all seem to agree on. Now,
Actually, a lot
I'm
of
there.
police stuff I think we genuinely agree on. Which,
well,
if you don't mind me trying to get back to that subject, if that's okay.
sorry.
So is there I don't know if we've covered this. Is there a good aspect to any sort of policing? Like what I realize you touched on this arguably a little bit with in terms of short-term stuff, but
Well, there are better ways to achieve most of the stuff that the police do. Like, I use an app called Cell 411, and it's very popular here in Keene. All of my friends use it. So if my house gets broken into or whatever, I'm going to open Cell 411 and send out that notification to all of my friends, and they will show up probably within 10 minutes, whereas the police will take like 38 minutes. But if someone doesn't have that social network, that friends network, that family network, and they need this external agency who can come and help them, then I'm fine with that existing. But that's all it should do. It should come and help people.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would be a benefit, is that people would have this last resort option that they could contact when they needed help. But it should be a last resort option, I think. I think people should explore other possibilities, and the world would be a lot safer.
I'm kind of getting sold on the idea of libertarian sheriffs here.
Well, I mean, they're not all as good as Aria, so I will
No,
say
I'm far
that
to the
some
left of a lot of libertarians, yeah.
there's some
there's the
there
far
are
right
plenty of
libertarians.
there are plenty of libertarians who are busy sucking Republican cock, and don't actually follow, only care about the capitalistic aspect and not the other aspects that are supposed to be in libertarianism.
Well, we always say that there's that old saying about libertarians are just Republicans who want to watch porn and smoke pot. But Aria has proven that's definitely not the case. You know, I was,
Although all this sucking cock is a bad thing, I'm like,
no,
wait a
it's not.
second.
But sucking Republican cock is a bad thing.
Okay, just checking.
Well, I
Anyway.
mean, like, what if the Republican is hot? That's the question.
Well, have you got a crush on Ann Coulter now?
No, I don't.
Oh
I don't actually want to suck anyone's cock, but that's beside the point. It's a hypothetical, and it's an important hypothetical. Yeah.
I've always thought that Ann Coulter's actually an alien, and because like she's got, you know, like those pictures of aliens. They've got like really long faces with big eyes, and they've got really long fingers. Well, if you look at her, right, she's got a long face and she's got long fingers. I actually think she's wearing an exoskeleton, skin or whatever it is, just
You
over the
think
top.
She could just, reach behind and unzip, right?
Yeah. But anyways, I was going to say this is a trans-orientated stream, so maybe we should ask Aria about some trans stuff. And I know you've had some transphobic shit.
Oh, yeah.
You got your car trashed. Now we can't mention the word.
Yeah.
But we can say FAG was scribbled on the graffitied on the side of your car with a penis. Have you had any other transphobic stuff?
No, that was actually it. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. Like, I went out to the mail Saturday and I had a letter there from someone that is just a very nice letter. Most people who are hateful, I mean, hate isn't a very motivating emotion, and it's a lot of trouble to vandalize someone's car or to vandalize their home or to attack them. So most of the hatred and the animosity is just circulating amongst itself at like Fox News and inside the secret parties that the Republicans are having, where they're getting a large cash donation from an out-of-state church to go to Earl Nelson, or where they're discussing violating their bylaws to discuss how they're going to support Nelson over me. They keep that to themselves. If someone is actually motivated enough to contact me, it's almost certainly going to be because, they're motivated by positivity, not negativity.
Well, that's
the
good to
one
hear.
thing we touched on it a little bit on Twitter, you and I, but the one thing that surprised the hell out of me was that Fox News gendered you correctly.
Yeah.
And the data and the mail.
You said the one that didn't was the Hill,
Yes.
which is weird.
And I think the Hill used they them instead, which got Richard Stallman's attention. He's the founder of oh god, I'm spacing on the name. Anyway, he's huge into internet privacy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he writes this article where he proposes using per and purse in replacement for gender pronouns, because the quote that he had there from the Hill, it's so confusing. I understand what they're trying to say, and I still don't understand what they're trying to say, because they first use they to reference me, and then the Republican Party, and then the voters of Cheshire County, and all of us are being called they. So it's very hard to figure out who exactly they're talking about when they could just say she.
Well, here's the thing. You could just, like, completely get rid of, well, I mean, I'm joking to some degree. You just get rid of pronouns and just be like Aria DiMezzo, and just, like, completely mention the thing each time. But admittedly, when it comes to conversation, nobody would want to do that, because that would be a fucking pain in the ass. Although, really fun for a Mass Effect game, because that one species does not use pronouns. This one would like to talk with, like, legit no pronouns. Not me, not you, not they, not them, not he, not she, none of that. Anyways, one of the things that always, when it comes to police force and just about everything, I'm genuinely curious if the police, as it is right now, attracts cruel people,
I think that's obvious.
Well, it does because it gives them power over others, right? And if a person wants to abuse power over others, becoming a police officer is the obvious choice. They're not going to become, a school teacher or a fireman because then they don't have power to abuse over others.
Well,
So the kind of person who wants to hurt other people is going to become a cop because that's the job where they can do that.
wasn't there a survey done not so long ago, and it was the vast majority of policemen were conservatives.
I do not know that study.
I don't know it either. I'm much more aware of the number of what was it like? I can't remember the number of police officers who are known abusers, but it's
speculated at 40%.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, you always hear stories in America and here about, say, some policeman has beaten the shit out of his girlfriend or his wife. The police will close in and protect him, rather than him being actually charged with domestic abuse as he should be.
Well, the lack of accountability is a major problem. I mean, just having accountability for police doing wrong things would make a big difference, but you can't really get that from the police itself because they fire you if you speak out against them, or you get into other more negative situations. If you're a police officer who's like, hey, this other police officer did a bad thing, and then the person speaking out is the one who gets fired, not the police officer who did bad things. So,
and again, all of that is the reason that the sheriff's office exists outside of that. They can't fire me.
yeah,
No one can. If I become sheriff, they can't fire me. So I can do that without fear of consequences from within the department because I will be the one in charge. If they take issue with me reporting their bad behavior, well, they're going to get fired for bad behavior anyway. But there isn't a whole lot of that here in Keene and Cheshire County or in towns throughout Keene.
Well, policemen don't get fired for bad behavior. We know this.
well,
I know
no,
they don't, but they will get arrested in Cheshire County for it.
yeah, if it's a small enough area, there are various pockets where some things are better than others, but the vast majority of police who do things get a slap on the wrist and like a paid vacation where they get to sit away when they get caught doing a bad thing, unless there's enough people protesting or rioting about it and then something happens.
Yeah, but people shouldn't have to riot. That's the point. The thing is that the thing is there's obviously not enough oversight of the police in America, and with Trump in the White House, that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, the president only does so much directly, oftentimes, although there has been various Republican love of dealing with the court system, but when it comes to police activity, I don't know how much the president is actually involved.
Well, probably not much, but again, none of this would be the case. The riots wouldn't be necessary if sheriffs and deputies were actually out there doing their jobs and protecting people from the actions of police. The police are the biggest threat anyone has in their lives today.
Yeah.
Why aren't sheriffs doing anything about it?
Yeah, and it's because people have ignored, we're not taught much about politics when we're kids, and people just see a giant list of names, giant list of options, oftentimes with one name, and they're just like, well, I guess the system will. The people have gotten complacent.
Yeah.
When it comes to the
clearly.
system.
I mean, that's exactly how I won the primary by 4,000 votes, is that people were complacent. They just voted for me, trusting that there was some mechanism in place to make sure that all candidates were going to, be a certain way, but there isn't. They just buy into that mythology.
Yeah. Go on.
No, go ahead, Alex.
Okay. I was just gonna say that the Republican, if you look at the actual platform of Republican Democratic Party, there's not like a ton of difference. It just seems like a bunch of empty platitudes.
Yes, but I would say the only reason I'm saying vote Biden is because he will stop the war on LGBT people, at least at a federal level, when obviously he can't do much at a state level.
And decriminalization of marijuana is in there too.
Yep, I remember Kamala Harris mentioning that at the last debate. In fact, Joe Biden, believe it or not, is more left-wing than the new Labour leader here, Keir Starmer, on many issues. So anyone who says that he's centre-right, not quite, I don't think.
Well, I mean, if you... yeah, I mean, if you can make an argument that anyone is left or right if you, depending on where you decide the center is.
One of the arguments, I'm not really having the argument. I'm just saying I'm kind of avoiding the argument. Everybody's going on about direct action, and I have one person who used to be my friend, but apparently I'm not, lefty enough, which I'm fucking to the left of him. I'm just older and I've seen some shit, he said, somebody told me voting is direct action. That's stupid. That can't be right. I'm like, yes, voting is direct action. That is true. I mean, it's the best. It's the first of the direct actions.
Well, I mean,
nothing gets.
Yeah, I still think that Biden's most significant feature for me is his not being Trump.
I think
so long as I can rely on him to continue to not be Trump, I'm willing to vote for him.
I think a lot of people are going to be like Perfict. They're going to just vote for Biden because he isn't Trump.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. That being said, I should have mentioned, technically, we are at the point where we can get as off topic as we want, and people technically can call in, but at the moment I still only trust Perfict when it comes to phone screenings because the trolls have gotten me too paranoid, and I will. It's very difficult to get me to say an okay on it. Although I will say, in terms of stuff, I would also like things to be limited and on a topic. And please, I don't want we talked about masks too much. If you're doing a phone call about masks, please don't.
I was gonna say the last time I spoke to Aria, I didn't get time to tell her my Pink Floyd story. And I do want to tell her this because it's funny. So Bob Geldof was cast in the film The Wall, which I know you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was approached by his manager about doing The Wall when they were in the back of a taxi. And Bob Geldof, being Bob Geldof, going, no, it's fucking prog rock. I hate fucking Pink Floyd. They're boring, I'm a punk, blah, 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 blah. So anyways, they get out of the taxi, and the taxi driver drives back to his depot, picks up the phone, and calls his brother, Roger Waters, the bass player in Pink Floyd. It's a true story.
That's wild.
Yes.
Also, there's a very sick joke I heard. In the film, Bob Geldof gets a whole load of blood and puke thrown. Where he jumps into a pool of blood and puke, right? Well, he got the same treatment when he went round to the parents of Michael Hutchins to ask for his belt back.
To ask for his what back?
That is. Don't repeat that joke. Do not repeat that joke.
To ask for his belt back. the parents of Michael Hutchins to ask for his belt back.
I
I don't
get
think
it.
I get it.
I get it, and
Yeah,
thankfully
you
no
don't
one.
need it explained.
Yeah. Please don't.
So, I've just genuinely been curious because when it comes to anarchy, there is so much in terms of views, and there is quite a wide diversity of views, and I know
Certainly.
people oversimplify things. I'm curious. Are you of the view that things should be changed incrementally towards dismantling things?
No, I mean, if that's the only option, then I'm going to take whatever steps I can to cause the change that I want to see in the world. Ideally, I would be successful and we could just have that happen instantly. It's probably not going to happen, but if we could, I would absolutely pursue it. But in light of that, I'm going to do anything and everything I can,
Yeah.
regardless of how small the actual impact is.
Yeah.
So you don't
no,
have to undermine the whole system and have it fall down like a house of cards immediately?
If I could do it.
Well, yeah. It's one of those things where I think some people fantasize too much about tearing everything down or whatnot, and I'm always concerned with stuff being teared down of what sorts of things might be being put in its place. There's plenty of violent revolutions that have ended up with fascists taking control because the abusive people are people who want to take control, and so bad people oftentimes.
More often than not in history, when there's been a vacuum of power, a strong man will step in.
We have that here, sort of.
Well, famously,
the enemy of peaceful anarchy is, of course, organized assholes.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, famously after the French Revolution, you had the Citizenry Council, which completely fucked up. And when there was a power vacuum, Napoleon stepped in. It happened in Russia. It happened in Russia. People often talk about the October Revolution. Well, there was actually a revolution earlier in February of 1917, which was far more anarchist in its whatever. And well, it didn't succeed because people like a strong man, particularly, I don't know, in Eastern Europe for some reason.
Well, people would have to be prepared to shoot the strong man when he came in and tried telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm your ruler now, and you're going to obey or I'm going to shoot you. We have to have people who are ready and willing to put a stop to that before it can develop.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where a lot of violent stuff ultimately is a last resort, but a last resort that sometimes does have to be taken because, well, complacency. I mean, not to bring things back to World War II, but I will bring things back to pre-World War II and Nazi Germany and the complacency that helped Hitler rise to power. The complacency that this is just one bad thing and everything's going to get fine. And yes, there were people fighting against that, and yes, there was actual action taken against, but it was too small.
When you decide that you're screwing monetization in the title, you just really go whole hog, right?
Well, yeah. Look, you know what? Fuck it. We should be able to talk about some subjects and not worry too much about whether the richest people are going to care about things and care more about actual truth and trying to figure out and think about what might actually benefit people.
On
Do you know?
on the same subject, I've been trying to punch in here. But on the same subject, I was watching a documentary on prison reform in Canada several years ago, and one thing that struck me is one of the wardens says, prisons only work with the consent of the imprisoned. He said, and that's a lesson that everybody should learn. And I thought, and this has stuck with me pretty much, because it's always the consent. There is always a tacit consent to any kind of government or any kind of system, which is not necessarily, it's not necessarily healthy unless the system is healthy.
Well, actually, that's inspired me to ask a question to Aria. Are you one of those anarchists who believes in getting rid of all prisons?
Yes.
The good kind.
How would that work?
So you know.
We know that, I mean, and this is psychologically proven, rewarding people for good behavior entices them to engage in better behavior more effectively than does punishing bad behavior. The entire prison system that we have is built around punishing bad behavior, and it's generally not effective. You know, people make the argument that we have to have laws against murder because otherwise everyone would be out there killing each other. But I mean, just be honest and ask yourself, even if murder was legal, would I actually kill anyone? The answer for the overwhelming majority of people is going to be no, of course I wouldn't. I don't want to hurt people. And when a person is willing to murder someone, they're not going to be persuaded not to because of fear of punishment. So ideally, we would have a social mechanism in place that actually rewards people for good behavior, that allows them to become more successful at their jobs or have more friends, be well liked, whatever, just feel good about themselves, instead of a system that is designed to punish bad behavior. And meanwhile, we would, everybody should have a gun. If someone tries to kill you, kill them first.
That's one I will disagree with. Some people shouldn't have a gun only because there are a few exceptions to that, because of people who are suicidal or at genuine risk for self-harm. Having a convenient tool to do that increases the risk of suicide.
We had a gun in the house at one point, and I made sure that I never knew where it was.
Well, I mean, I'm not really at that risk anymore, and I am not inherently 100% opposed. Maybe this is where the co-hosts start fighting.
My housemate, because of his job, had to be proficient in firearms, and he had a gun. He eventually, I didn't know this for a while because, again, I didn't want to know where it was. He eventually put it in the locker at his job because he said he was too afraid of using it on himself.
Well, yeah. I was gonna.
Why I didn't want to know where it was.
I mean, I was gonna say the whole. I understand, Aria, your argument. We should all have guns, and I do remember the John Locke book, Guns Make a Civil Society, or whatever it was called.
I know it was John Locke. John Locke was like a 16th.
No, John Locke. John Locke, I think his name was. It was, yeah.
But it's critical because the police have to travel to you to help you. If somebody breaks into your home and they want to kill you, the police, you have a 38-minute or so period there where there is no one to help you, and your only course of action is going to be to defend yourself.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, look, if I lived in the United States, I wouldn't have a problem with people owning guns if they want to, because there are just so many guns in the United States.
Yeah, there are.
Now in
Well-
this country, in this country, there are very, very strict laws on owning firearms. But the question I wanted to ask you, two questions. First of all, what about psychopaths? I guess you would send them to a psychiatric hospital rather than a prison.
Ideally.
Yeah. And secondly, one of the problems I have with this "we should all own guns" and argument is that someone will always own a bigger gun than you.
Well, yeah, but I mean, at some point, like, they're... So, at some
But
point...
they may not
you
have more friends than I do.
Yeah, but, like, there's so many factors to things. So, like, if you're talking about... you aren't... one individual isn't going to be able to take on a military force. That's a... like... That's obviously the case. When it comes to firearms, there are certain aspects. You can't protect every aspect of your body and be able to move around. And definitely not do that frequently. If there's... I think you've talked about this a bunch, Sophia, when it comes to the threat of violence being a factor when it comes to change. And firearms are also a factor of that. That's why I kind of like some of the aspects of the Black Panther Party, what they were doing. And the NRA started to fight against people having lots of guns because black people had guns.
Yeah, exactly. That was the first time you ever had, the gun nuts say, there should be gun control because black people were now owning firearms.
This is why I am, pro gun rights. You said someone will always have a bigger gun. That's true right now. That someone is the American government. That someone is the least trustworthy institution on the planet, the one that has actually dropped nuclear bombs on people. They're the ones who have the biggest guns. That's a problem that needs to be fixed.
Not defunding the police, but I would assume that demilitarizing at the very least the police would be the first step. Yes.
I was gonna. Sorry,
That,
I was gonna.
That is for Aria. Oh.
I do have signs that say disarm the police, yes. I mean, a lot of people have to leave their gun in their car when they go to their job. I believe that police are probably one of those jobs. You can't have your gun on your hip if you're working as a cashier at Walmart. Why do we let police do it? They're the ones who cannot be trusted with it.
I mean the demilitarizing as in once you put on the...
police shouldn't have armored vehicles.
We shouldn't have the armored.
Well, that's part of disarming them, is taking away,
their
weapons.
I mean, the police here, it's more community based.
Yeah.
It's policing by consensus, it seems to work well. However, it's a misnomer to say that the police are unarmed in this country. Let me tell you a story, and this involves me. Funny enough, a few years ago when I was living somewhere else. I was about to go out, and all of a sudden I heard a ruckus, and there was a policeman standing outside my door. So I just opened the door, and this guy turned around, and he had a fucking automatic machine gun. Now I've seen guns before. I'm South African. South Africans are pretty attached to their guns, particularly white South Africans, and so even in a situation like that, I thought, oh shit. It turned out what happened was that when neighbor 2 doors along had some sort of fight with his next door neighbor, and the only patrol car in the area to deal with it was the armed response unit. There's always an armed response unit in every area patrolling. right? You know, the thing is, this wasn't like he wasn't armed with anything, you know, but the armed response unit turned up, you know,
Hmm.
and there have been occasions in this country where some policemen has got a bit trigger happy, you know, even if a person's unarmed, right? And so I do know that this sort of shit happens. Now, as for the someone will always have a bigger gun, the point I'm trying to make, Harry, is it's not necessarily the government. In your anarcho-capitalist society, someone's always going to be richer than someone else.
Hmm.
It happens, right?
Sure.
So they're going to be able to afford better weapons, bigger weapons than, say, me or Alex or Christy. You see, that's what I'm saying.
That's no different from what we have, where the government, the ultra elite, the ultra rich are the ones who have more money and therefore more guns. I don't have a fighter jet. I mean, the hypothetical you're proposing to me is literally the world we have right now.
Yes.
I understand what you're saying.
So I don't know why that's an argument against anarcho-capitalism. At the very worst, it's an argument for it. At the very least, it couldn't be worse than what we have now.
Someone said to me the other day they didn't think you were an ANCAP. They said that you were a mutualist.
I'm a voluntarist.
I can't remember who that was, Alex.
What? No, I was just saying that your general position seemed a lot closer to mutualism. I did want to have a separate discussion about that, which I was not prepared for at the moment. Look, I just got over a disease. I can't recall.
Yeah,
I mean, because mutualism involves a lot more of the whatever. It's a mixture of socialism and capitalism. It doesn't like have a problem with a lot of the aspects of capitalism. I needed to do more research before having an actual conversation. That was just sort of the vibes I was getting because of the like there are more systems to actually help people who need it. I know that's also an anarchistic system, but it genuinely is. Well, I don't.
I mean, I generally don't care what people do. I'm a voluntarist. I tend to think that the free market system is probably the best way to make sure everyone is treated fairly and to make sure that there are checks and balances. But if other people want to use a different system, or if their system works better, then let those two systems compete fairly in an open, free world and see which one comes out on top.
Sorry, just a minute. Are you all right, Alex? I didn't mean to upset you, hon.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just
sorry, I didn't mean to put you
randomly distracted thinking about it because I was like, shit. I wasn't prepared for this. Because like I need to look into mutualism a bit more. But that also involves me looking into the general aspects of social systems in terms of anarchism versus some other systems. I just personally am of the opinion that capitalism there are aspects of capitalism, in my opinion, that too easily don't have. There seems to be too many exploitable aspects to if people can't easily survive with having a place to eat. Having a place to live, having food to eat, because it's hard to make the best job decision if you're like, I need something, otherwise I will die. But yeah, no, that involves a whole long conversation. And I definitely would want to get into a bit more research before having some of the details of that, especially in terms of mutualism, because mutualism is obviously some aspects of volunteer, and the need stuff is a bit more taken care of, and the want stuff is all covered by the free market.
In the 2.5 hours that didn't air of our conversation, because it was cut down to an hour 10, I actually tend to agree. I think definitions are always a little wobbly when you get into certain places.
Oh,
But
yeah, no, that's definitely the case.
Volunteerism and mutualism are not that far apart, so I kind of agreed with Alex on that.
Well, a lot of anarchism, arguably, because anarchy is based off of volunteering and based off of no one person is above everyone else. It definitely there ends up being similarities in terms of aspects. At the very least, if you put anarchy as more, the anarchistic system is more important than capitalism specifically, because sometimes people put capitalism over the anarchy and they'd be fine with a republican that's capitalistic as opposed to is more important than like an anarchistic system that's not.
People misunderstand anarchism. They don't realize that it's actually a branch of socialism.
Mm-hmm.
That's not correct.
Oh dear.
Individualist anarchism has existed as long as the word anarchism. I mean, look at the root word for anarchy. It comes from Greek, anarchos, which means without rulers. The system is literally just without rulers. Socialists took it over and refused to acknowledge the validity of any other system. In the same way that Xerox now means to copy, instead of being a company that makes copying machines, the left did the same thing with the word anarchism and anarchist. But that didn't mean there aren't other printing companies out there. There aren't other devices that you can use to make a copy of something. There are other branches of anarchy out there, and they've always existed. Going all the way back to Lao Tzu, these arguments for individualist anarchism have existed. If you can find me a source that predates Lao Tzu, I will grant you that socialism is the seed from which anarchism grows.
I've often called myself a communist libertarian, which is share the wealth and leave me alone.
Oh yeah, some people describe me as a libertarian socialist, but I prefer democratic socialist or something.
Yeah, I'm Dem.
You and I consider myself left of center. I don't like some of these labels. They get too confusing, and language changes, and different people as soon as even if anarchy was invented one way, that doesn't matter. What matters is how it's used now, because that's how people communicate. People communicate with a language that's used now. They don't communicate with the root origins of anything, regardless of what they are. It's completely irrelevant in some ways. It's not always irrelevant, but sometimes it is. I think dick meant like having a sheath or something. Like, there's a lot of weird things out there with languages. That's like, who cares? Or no, not sheath. That would sword.
No,
whatever.
The founder of this show has a bug up her ass about the origins of SJW, and takes it back to the protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Oh,
None of that fucking matters. That has nothing to do. Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist. She was for birth control. We keep the birth control. We get rid of the eugenics. Things change.
Exactly. Look, I'm not saying you're not an anarchist, Aria. I mean, I do recognise. Look, I'm as far as I'm concerned, language changes, our understanding of stuff because our understanding of stuff changes. Look at the theories on gender. This is the whole problem with TERFs. They're stuck in this, attitude that gender is biology when it's not. It's a social construct. This is something which is quite new to understand what gender is a social construct. I'm sure someone could trace it back centuries, but there have been people saying this for centuries. But for most people, it's generally a new thing. talking of gender stuff, I think it'd be amiss if we don't mention on air a certain a certain truth scummer getting their comeuppance. Blair White.
Can't have an episode without Blair, can we?
No.
I mean, we can technically. We could. Just keeps
well,
getting brought
well,
up.
no, but the thing is, I hate to say it, this is a long time coming. It is. It's a long time coming. Finally, she's been found out. Well, it's not just she's been found out before, but no one took any notice. And now she's been found out for lying, and it's hit her where it hurts. Her bottom line, money, because that's what all grifters, think about.
Okay, I'm not in the know here on this.
All right, so
I'm
she
not
made.
either. I don't think Blair White is worth giving the airtime to. I don't think she's worth discussing. I mean, she's a monster. I'd rather just forget she exists.
Yeah, let's forget
Okay.
she.
All right.
I am
she made
absolutely fine with this. I forget
Okay.
she exists half the time, anyways.
I'll do the very shortest version. She said something very untrue about somebody in order to make a stupid point, and
Color me shocked.
the person turned around and actually threatened legal action, which the woman in question would be fully within her rights to do. And Blair had to apologize, and she did a dinky apology. And that's the very shortest version that I can think of. So there you go.
Okay.
I was going to ask you, when was the first time you ever heard the word trans?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
It's just the reason I ask you, because I remember I went back through the interview I did with Dusty Smith, who's from the same state as you originally. And he told me he hadn't heard of evolution, the theory of evolution, until he was in his 30s.
I knew about evolution when I was in the 3rd grade. So, I mean, we went to different schools. I have no idea what his school taught him.
Yeah. Yeah, but didn't you? I remember you mentioned publicly, I think you mentioned it with Christy, about your parents thought that the millennium was going to bring about the apocalypse.
Well, my mother was dead by that point. My father seemed to lean toward that. He wasn't as bad as some of the other people in my family. My grandmother was convinced of that. And she was the one who had custody of me. And she was convinced of that because my uncle was convinced of that.
And plus they were post-millennialist, which is like the crazy part.
There's a lot of crazy parts to them.
Well, yes, I'm really trying to shorten everything up because there's a lot to get through.
Yeah, but I'm sure you told some story about how they had you on patrol on New Year's Eve.
Well, they didn't have us on patrol on New Year's Eve. I mean, they taught us how to conduct patrols and all of that. But kudos to them. That's one of the reasons, I know about guns and how to use them effectively, is because of that insane Christian military style training that we underwent as kids, because they were convinced that the Antichrist was about to take over the world. So we were like cowering on New Year's Eve and waiting for the world to end, but we weren't out patrolling yet.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood.
I will say I know. I'd say I know a little bit about guns, but have never fired one before. And not from a lack of interest. I didn't own one, obviously, for psychological reasons. So I've got my depression under control. I'm not really a risk to myself anymore. So at this point, I probably wouldn't have a problem owning it. That said, the most I know is a disarm technique, gun disarm techniques, because I mostly learned hand-to-hand stuff. Although I also did learn traditional Japanese spearmanship, which was really effectively they taught me the basics of early military training for you to not think about stuff. which is important in a combative or violent situation. You just have to focus on the actions needed to get done to get stuff done, and not the potential consequences, or if you'll fuck up, or if you'll get hurt, or any of that stuff. Because that stuff, if you think too much, you actually get hurt. Sorry, those random thoughts. It's
there's one. I actually don't know how old you are, and I know we discussed that, but
never ask a lady at their age. It's like it's a rule that you don't ask people.
I'm trying to talk not too much about what we talked about off air. I was in the Guardian Angels for a little bit, which that kind of thing I think is more useful and should be brought back.
Wait, what's the Guardian Angels?
Vigilante group who patrolled the New York subway.
Oh.
No, not entirely. That's part of the problem Curtis Lewa got too, handsy. The guy who ran it. But things like citizen patrols are not a bad idea. I mean, unarmed citizen patrols. They were very radically unarmed. I learned a lot from that because I have had guns pointed at my head before, which is not fun. And I had a point here. What do you think of citizens? Just generally, what do you think of citizen patrol type things?
I mean, it's people can do what they want.
Well, but if
that's literally what I do when I'm out there cop blocking, is doing citizens patrols focused on the police. I think it's a positive thing, and I think more people should do it. I think if more people did it, then the stigma and fear around guns would go away, which would be a win for everyone.
Well, like I said, Guardian Angels were radically not armed.
Right.
That was one of the. Although the disarm technique was taught to me by Lisa Sleeva, so that's cool.
Yeah, although the disarm technique that I learned was a very old one and not as good as not as potentially useful as the Israeli military force gun disarm techniques. But that's a whole nother story of I have looked up way too much information about fighting related stuff. Did you know I own sorry, I know I've gotten really off topic, but I might genuinely think some of that stuff is cool, okay? Let me nerd out for a second here. No, I have I know I have a retractable baton and a tomahawk and a pocket knife, and
I don't have any of this. I
yeah, you're underarmed. You're like way underarmed.
I know.
I've got a bat left.
Is it sharpened or is it dull? Because if it's dull, it's not going to be as much help. Not no help, but
sharpened. There are many swords in this house.
If you be caught carrying a knife in this country, it's an automatic 2-year prison sentence.
That does change things. You can carry a retractable baton legally pretty easily in most areas of America. Pocket knife, so long as it's under a certain size, is legal.
God, that sucks. I walk around with a gun attached to my hip, and I walk into banks and gas stations and restaurants, and it's never an issue.
You see, well, you're not.
That's New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Well, with banks here, you're not even allowed to wear a until the COVID. Oh no, shit! Sorry, no, I'm not going there. No, sorry.
Oh no!
Sorry, almost. Yeah, no.
But you are correct. A year ago, I would not have been allowed to walk into a bank with my face covered and with a gun on my hip. But now I do it all the time.
I did notice the AP photo, your gun was poking up out of your above your belt.
Well,
Yeah.
it wasn't. That's the issue, is that I wear skirts, so I don't generally wear belts. And the question, a lot of women, a lot of trans women have this problem. Okay, well then, where do I put my gun? And the solution that I've come up with is to use a left-handed holster that runs inside the skirt, because otherwise, the added weight is just going to constantly pull your skirt down, and you don't want that.
Are you
Well, it
left-handed?
depends on who you are and who you're talking to.
Well, you don't want that while walking down the street.
Oh, we have different priorities.
So, I mean,
Sorry.
obviously,
Sorry.
I assume
Film.
I will immediately be canceled because, despite the fact that police and National Guard and definitely oh, why is my brain not remember? The bad thing that there was a whistleblower about them giving hysterectomies to immigrants. The fucking
ICE?
yeah, the ICE. Like, those people are the most dangerous. Like, they're like just about any other civilians at most are a risk to themselves with firearms most of the time. Most of the people I would think who are killed are either personal familial grudges or police officers or ICE members or
I was going to ask Aria. Keen's a sanctuary city, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
Is Keene a sanctuary city?
It is located within a sanctuary county. That's
Right.
the one thing I agree with Rivera on. He just didn't go nearly far enough.
As if you're going to get a lot of Mexican immigrants.
No, I mean, I doubt there's any in New Hampshire. So, I mean, it's a cheap, easy signaling position for him to take, knowing that it's never really going to become relevant in the first place. I want Cheshire to be a sanctuary county for drugs, prostitutes, all these victimless crimes.
yeah, which are
Buffalo is a sanctuary city, and we are on a border, so that is.
Anyway, so I was gonna ask
And
Aria
idiots.
couple of questions. You've already answered this on my own stream, but I thought this is a trans orientated stream, so I should ask.
well, I
you.
mean, with trans hosts, we do talk to people who aren't trans on this as well as trans people. But
okay, fair enough. Oh yeah,
we
did
do
have
like I do like to humanize trans
true.
people.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say you. I know that. Well, you can tell people your attitude. What's your attitude towards J.K. Rowling?
I don't respect her.
Well, the last time round you said fuck J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, I would still. I mean, yeah, still fuck her. Screw her.
Yeah, I was going to say. Also, one thing that really impressed me, and it really did impress me, my darling, is normally with libertarians, and I've had this experience, that if a company is supporting an anti-LGBTQ initiative, they will defend the right of that company to do that, or they, and I know you will, but they will make a bigger play about that than the people they're actually victimizing. And I do remember what you said about Chick-fil-A, that they were selling sandwiches
chicken.
of hate. Yeah, wasn't it? Sandwiches of
chicken.
hate. Yeah, hate. And this is why I love you, because you are prepared to stand up for LGBTQ people, despite everything.
Well, I mean, yeah, that business owner, he has the right to associate himself with people who he wants to associate with, and I have the right to go buy a chicken sandwich that isn't sold to me by a hateful monster. I can't imagine why any LGBTQ person would want to give their money to Chick-fil-A at this point, or anyone who calls themselves an ally. Why would you want to give Chick-fil-A money at this point? Just stop giving them money. Go somewhere else. Go to KFC. they don't sell hate chicken.
Yeah, I was about to say, well, one person who does is Claire White. She's always having that cup, the Chick-fil-A thing.
Oh, fucking A. Anyways.
There she is again.
Yeah.
At least we didn't mention the British Blair.
Oh yeah, Rose of Moron.
Anyways, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So I know we're coming relatively close to closing time. I was just gonna say that I really think that you standing up is a good thing, and I know if I was a teenager, like especially given that I was a libertarian as a teenager to rebel against my socialist parents. Anyways, like I would definitely look up to you, and I think it's good to have trans people to look up to, so that people can, so it's not as weird of a thing, and so life doesn't seem as hopeless.
I was gonna say I'm a die on the wall socialist, and I support Aria.
Yeah.
See, I just like you. Well, since it's a love fest for Aria here, I really loved hanging out with you. That was
I love talking to you. Yeah.
I think Cheshire should look forward to your term as sheriff.
Yeah, you better win.
I hope.
I want to see that so badly. Like
I do too.
So
I have one. Oh, sorry. Go.
Oh, what?
No, it's just impossible to predict what the results of this will actually be. There are those Liberty Republicans here in Cheshire County who may vote for me. I suspect I'll pull over a lot of Democrat voters. How many independents will I get? How many Republicans will take the stupid, idiotic approach of writing at Earl Nelson? That their alternative was to just vote for the Democratic incumbent, Eli Rivera. And then they're like, no, we're going to do a write-in campaign that won't be successful. So they're literally just taking votes away from Rivera, which makes it easier for me to win. I don't think they realize that, but that's what they did. Every single, because he's a write-in candidate, so there's no chance of winning whatsoever. And the people who are going to write him in, otherwise, we're going to just vote for Rivera. So thanks, guys. The Republican Party here is the official Republican Party, not the Republican voters, but the apparatus that calls itself the Republican Party here is stupid.
I think there's a large segment of the population there that would be pleased with your policies.
Yeah.
I tend to think so as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they actually looked at your policies and didn't see Republican ANCAP and nope, look no further. I know everything about them, and I know there can't possibly be an exception to the rule. Despite there's always been various exceptions to candidate forces, and it's important to recognize that and actually vote for someone who you actually care about the policy of, instead of just saying, oh, they're Republican, or they have this general way of describing themselves, so they must be bad. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how many people are seeing ANCAP because that's not how I portray myself.
Well, I was thinking of the awful anarchist. Facebook thing. So,
I just use anarchist, right? And that's not going to necessarily turn those people away. I don't call myself Shemale anymore either. I haven't done that in years. Ian is still doing that, and I'm not going to tell him not to. I think I've asked him at some point not to.
And also, Ian still uses the T slur, which
I still use that though.
Yeah, there are some trans people who still use that. It's very much there. That's the thing. There's segments of the trans population which there's a long time without internet. There's a long time before internet, and some people stick to different things, and some people care about different things. And
are you telling me the trans population isn't a monolith?
yeah, exactly. It's not a monolith, and people can have things that you agree with and disagree with, or people can be monsters. But you're not a monster, Aria.
I've always said that the way I see the T-slur is a bit like the N-word, that there is a segment of the black population who thinks the N-word ending in an A is acceptable to call one another, right? And that's the way I see the T-slur, that if I call, another trans person the T-slur, that's fine. But if some cis person says it, then that's not all right.
I think context is important, and I don't think anyone would try to make the argument that Ian Freeman is transphobic. I mean, he hired me, he keeps me employed there, he was my campaign manager, he's largely responsible for all of this happening to a trans person. He clearly doesn't have an issue with trans people.
Yeah,
I see no reason to get upset and say, oh no, you can't use that word. His behavior proves that he doesn't have anything against trans people.
But I was going to say, do you feel sometimes like you're being used as the token trans woman for libertarians?
No.
Right.
And even if I did, it wouldn't matter because it's still benefiting me. So, I mean, they can do what they want. I'm going to do what they want. I am who I am, and I just happen to be trans. And because of that characteristic, it's probably making more headlines than I otherwise would. But the Libertarian Party is supposed to be friendly of trans people. There should be a lot more trans people welcome within the Libertarian Party. Before we can get that, yeah, there's going to have to be someone who is the token trans person.
Yep.
Yeah, I think with a lot of that, it's just a bit complicated, but we are actually really getting close to closing time. So, Perfict, since you're the fastest, where can people find you?
The Rumpus Room and here. Simple, quick, easy, done.
Okay. Sophia, where can people find you, and is there anything you're working on that you want people to know about?
They can find me on Twitter at SophiaBotha74. I have a new blog starting in the next few days, SophiaCBotha.com. That's it.
Okay. Christy, where can people find you, and is there anything in particular you're working on that you would like people to know about?
Normality, Quake on Twitter. Christy Abbey is my regular channel. There's still Chris Abbey music without the TY. And those are the main places. I mean, you can find me on Facebook. I just came across some of my old songs on not SoundCloud, Reverb Nation. But no, I don't have anything I want to talk about yet. Sorry, I normally do. I just
okay, and I'll save you for last, Aria, since you are our special guest, and because I sometimes do that and sometimes don't, depending on how well I function. Anyways, I can be found on Twitter at Talking to Nothing. That's Talking to Nothing minus the G. I can be found Ozma in the Dark just about everywhere. I often stream Saturdays on Twitch, and I will be getting that YouTube episode up. I swear, Sophia, I was sick.
Oh yeah. Also check out the two streams me and Ozma did.
There's a lot of editing that needed to go into that YouTube video.
Well, no. I was going to say no. The two streams on Twitch. One is about Ben Shapiro and Israel, which I actually thought was really good. And
yeah, there's a YouTube version of that is up.
And also the reaction video we had to the VP debate. And who knows, maybe there'll be another reaction video to this week's debate. You never know.
Who knows?
And
Anyways,
well, also Sophia and I are supposed to be working on something new, so that's as far as I'm saying on that.
okay, Aria. Obviously, we know you're running for New Hampshire sheriff. I almost said governor. You're the governor now, Aria. That's what you're going for. Where can people find you? Where are people that?
My campaign site. Yeah, my campaign site is fpolice.com. That's EFFpolice.com. There they can find links to all of my social media profiles. There's also reformedsatanicchurch.com, where if they really want to dig into my positions and why I have those positions, that's more of the philosophical underpinning of why I stand where I stand. But the actual positions themselves can be found at fpolice.com, EFFpolice.com.
Okay.
Cool.
And is there anything else you want to? Is there anything else special you want to say?
Not in particular, not that we didn't get into.
Okay, so with that said,
Someday I'm going to be pointing to this episode and saying, "See, I knew her when."
well, I mean, yeah, but we can also point to the last episode too, where we had you on, Aria. But I don't know if it's stage fright because I remember like half of it sometimes.
That's okay.
Your mind,
you also forget the YouTube prayer itself, which is like, comment, subscribe. We have a Patreon that we haven't fucking worked on. We have a Discord.
We have like a lot of stuff in the down below, including I think the link to fpolice.com, because that's on your Twitter as well, right, Aria?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
And yeah, like, comment, and subscribe, obviously, and something. Your thoughts matter. You matter. Did I get two of them right?
Your voice matters. Your voice matters. Your life matters, and you matter.
Damn it! Wrong again.
Okay.
I know. It's just like at this point, it's kind of become funny, but I also but I like put no effort into remembering it. But at the same time, I want to remember it, and it happens like every episode.
Because it's in an odd order. It's not in an order that you normally think of, and that's why it's hard.
Which makes you think about it.
Yeah, it's I had a slightly different one before, and then I rewrote it because.
Yeah. Well, bye everybody. It was great having you. Bye.
Peace.
Huh.